The pain of being betrayed by the one you love most is profound, but the freedom that comes after is unstoppable. I've always been responsible for my family. From a very young age, I took on the responsibility of ensuring everything was in order, managing the finances and keeping the house running smoothly. Even when I didn't receive recognition, I never considered giving up. My name is Miguel, and at the time I was 27 years old. I worked as an accountant, a profession that gave me stability, but prevented me from realizing my own dreams. Whenever I could, I used my free time to help around the house, take care of my sick mother, and make sure my sister Juliana had everything she needed. The burden was heavy, but I never complained. At home, things weren't easy. My father, Rogerio, was always distant, more concerned with complaining than actually contributing. He didn't seem to see what I was doing for everyone there, and over time, this consumed me. My sister, Juliana, was the favorite. She always got everything she wanted, no questions asked. She had everyone's attention, and I was just the housekeeper. My grandfather, Joachim, always saw me differently. He knew I did what I did out of love, not obligation. It was he who entrusted me with a very important mission, a mission that would change everything. When my grandfather, Joachim, handed me the $30,000, trusting me to safeguard it, I knew it was further proof of his trust. He believed in me in a way I'd never seen in any other member of our family. It was a huge responsibility, but I was ready. To him, I was the grandson who made a difference. He knew I would never let the money slip away, no matter the circumstances. I didn't know, however, that this trust would be betrayed in the cruelest way possible. At first, things remained calm. My life went on, with its daily struggles and the pressure of being the pillar of my family. But one afternoon, as I was returning home after a tiring day at work, I overheard a conversation between my father, Rogerio, and my sister, Juliana. They were talking about a honeymoon, a dream trip she wanted to take with her husband, Diego. Something in me became suspicious when I heard my father say he already had everything sorted, but the word money kept echoing in my mind. I couldn't believe what I was thinking. That night, my father's words haunted me. I tried to ignore them, focusing on what I knew was right, but something inside me told me I needed to check. So without much thought, I went to where I kept the money. When I looked in the safe, a feeling of emptiness washed over me. The money wasn't there. I was overcome by immediate panic. My heart raced. I knew exactly what had happened. My own father had taken the money. He had stolen it, using it to pay for my sister's honeymoon. A low blow, treacherous and devastating. Anger consumed me. It wasn't just the money he'd taken, it was the trust, the loyalty of a lifetime of sacrifice. I felt as if I'd been stripped of everything. My father, who had always treated me with indifference, now treated me as if I were a nuisance, a mere detail in his life. Frustration overcame me, but what hurt me most was the certainty that he wouldn't have done this if he'd had any respect for me. It was clear that to him, I'd never been anything more than a useful tool for his interests. I didn't know how to react. I'd never faced a situation like that before. I tried to talk to my father, to confront him, but he denied everything with the utmost brazenness. The humiliation was greater than the anger. Not only had he stolen the money, but he was also trying to make me look like a fool, as if I were to blame for everything. Juliana, my sister, also joined in the conversation, but she seemed more concerned about the trip than what was happening. It wasn't hard to see that she knew everything, that she was complicit, but simply didn't care. I was in limbo. I felt like my world was falling apart, that the people I trusted most had become my enemies. My thoughts were in turmoil, my mind racing. But what hurt most was that deep down, I knew this wasn't just about the money. It was about the respect I never received, about the expectations everyone had of me that I carried alone. With the weight of my own parents' betrayal weighing heavily on my shoulders, I found myself on the verge of collapse. I had never felt so vulnerable, so exposed. Deep down, I knew that no matter how hard I tried to protect my family, no one was truly there for me. The pain of betrayal was immense, but the emptiness I felt was even greater. I had done everything in my power to give them the best, and now I was here, alone, with nothing left to lose. The following days were a whirlwind. I tried to take action, but I lacked courage. How could I face my father, the man who had always been an authority figure, and tell him he had crossed an irreparable line? I felt a mixture of anger, shame, and fear. I was afraid of what would happen if I rebelled, if I went against the order he had always imposed in our home. My brother Rogerio looked at me with a certain contempt, as if he owned everything and I were just his faithful squire, the son who couldn't assert himself. The final straw came when my mother, seeing the situation, told me I should just forget it and move on. She didn't understand. She had always been submissive to my father and never had the courage to stand up to him. It was as if she couldn't see the truth of what was happening. At that moment, a fury took over me. I could no longer remain silent. I could no longer allow lies, manipulation, and betrayal to continue to be the foundation of my life. The only thing I had at that moment was my dignity, and I wasn't going to let anyone steal that from me. It was then that I decided to do something drastic. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. If I didn't take action now, my life would never have meaning again. I went to the police and filed a complaint against my father. I know many may think I did it out of revenge, but it wasn't just that. It was a matter of emotional survival. I needed to stop being the person who always sacrificed herself for the sake of a false family peace. I needed to break the cycle of submission and take responsibility for my own life. My family's reaction was one of utter shock and outrage. They couldn't understand what I was doing. Rogerio called me ungrateful and a traitor. He didn't know how much it was destroying me inside, but I knew that to change, I had to cut the ties that bound me to this lie. I became isolated, but at the same time, I began to feel a sense of freedom I had never experienced before. It was frightening, but also liberating. As the process progressed, I began to see my life differently. I began to understand that if it weren't for this attitude, I would remain trapped in a situation that was detrimental to me. During this period, I found support in people who, although not family members, became true friends, people who saw my struggle and my suffering and helped me rebuild my self-confidence. Every day, I felt stronger, more capable of moving forward. Eventually, the case was resolved, and my father was prosecuted. Prison marked the end of an era, but also the beginning of a new life for me. It wasn't easy, and the emotional toll was high, but I knew that after everything that had happened, I had done the right thing for myself. I would no longer carry the burden of others' guilt, nor be the sacrifice everyone expected me to be. For the first time, I felt like I had taken control of my life. The process was long, but in the end, I found myself in a completely different place. I was no longer the son living in his father's shadow. I was Miguel, someone who had the courage to face the difficulties, the lies, and the challenges life threw at me. I learned the hard way that true overcoming comes when you decide to say enough to what hurts you, to what keeps you trapped in the past. And when you free yourself, you begin to see a future full of possibilities. The freedom I felt in taking this step, though painful, was transformative. It wasn't an instant turning point, but little by little, I realized that the weight of family expectations no longer crushed me. I began to see myself differently, to value my own opinion, and to trust in my ability to rebuild. I began to work harder on my own dreams, to build a life that was my own. I stopped being Rogerio's son and became Miguel, the man who managed to rise up after so much betrayal. I was able to look to the future without the constant fear of failure. because no matter how uncertain the path, I knew I was now in control. Little by little, I made new friends, found a support group, and most importantly, regained my peace of mind. I had always been the one sacrificing for others, but now I knew that the first step to helping someone was being okay with myself. I learned that there's no value in being a victim of the system, be it familial, social, or emotional. When I saw my father arrested, the feeling that prevailed in me was not satisfaction, but a certain relief. Finally, the truth had come to light. He would have to face the consequences of his actions. Juliana, my sister, stood by him. She would never understand, I knew that. But I could no longer carry the weight of responsibility for a family that never saw me as an equal, as worthy of respect. I was finally living for myself, without having to justify my actions to anyone. The legal process led me to a new stage of self-discovery. I never imagined that such a devastating event could teach me so many valuable lessons. Each step I took made me realize that true overcoming is something that is built gradually. It's not a sudden change, but a series of daily choices that require courage and determination. I learned that forgiveness begins within ourselves, and that by forgiving our own failures and choices, we can truly move forward. The hardest part was dealing with grief, fighting a past that, although painful, was part of who I was. I had to let go of the idea that everything in my life should be a sacrifice for others. I had to stop being the pillar and become my own foundation. The journey wasn't easy, but looking back, I see that every step was necessary to get here. I wouldn't be who I am today if I hadn't faced all those adversities. Over time, I learned to trust myself, to make decisions based on what I believed was right, not what others expected of me. I rebuilt my life and now live for myself, with greater peace of mind and self-sufficiency. There's no longer room for toxic people or unrealistic expectations. What once seemed like an unbearable burden has now become a springboard to a fuller, more genuine life. I know I still have a lot to learn, but I also know that overcoming is an ongoing process. What I experienced was just one part of my journey, but without a doubt, the most transformative. I was able to look at the mistakes, the pain, and the disappointments, and instead of succumbing to them, I found the strength to move forward. Today, I can proudly say that I'm no longer the Miguel I used to be. I'm someone who made a difficult choice, but who is now free to live the life he always deserved. And more than ever, I understand that true freedom comes from within. When you allow yourself to be who you truly are, without the weight of external expectations and pressures, the world around you begins to change. It wasn't easy, but it was the journey that made me understand the power of overcoming, the courage to say enough, and above all, to start over.